This new artist series, Train Hopping Analog Conversations in Digital Times, demonstrates the power of collaboration in challenging times.
Coupling the objectives of the gallery space at Arts at King Street Station with the cultural mission of the Goethe-Institut, Train Hopping seeks to provide a platform to center BIPOC creatives.
Good morning,
Good
Arielle.
morning. Good morning.
Happy
Good morning, Mr.
Tuesday?
Delbert.
Today Tuesday?
Yes.
Somewhere.
Yes.
Thank you so
Happy
much.
Tuesday.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you for the grounding before we started recording, because I think it's so important that we center ourselves. But I think equally important that we remember from which we come. And before we get started, one of the things I want to introduce, which is a grounding primarily for African and African Americans of diaspora, I brought an object. And for those that don't know, it's called the Sankofa bird. It's from the Akan people in West Africa. It's a mythical bird. But there's a belief associated with the bird that it flies forward with its head backwards. There's a couple of definitions, and one is to go back and fetch. One is to bring forth that is in the past. I like to say that Sankofa represents, in order for one to move forward, you must remember from which one comes. And so that in itself, to me, speaks to this experience we're getting ready to have. But here's the other piece, Arielle, that I don't think enough attention gets paid to is the egg, right? There's an egg right here, and the egg represents, I want to believe, you and I, because of the rich history of our ancestors and because of the sacrifices of our ancestors, we represent that future that in some ways a lot of them never got a chance to experience. And then the egg represents the unborn. So the question I always ask myself as a storyteller, I stand on the shoulders of some amazing people. But here's the question for Delbert is, how am I preparing my shoulders for the next generation? So with all honor, if I can call you my village niece, that would really embody what my responsibility is, because my shoulders are here for you to stand on because of my age, but also too because of my lived experience. It'll allow you, hopefully not to have to struggle or in some ways suffer as much as our ancestors have. So I just want to say that. So my name is Mr. Delbert Richardson. I am a second generation storyteller. I'm a self-taught community scholar, and I say self-taught because as my story goes, I didn't learn anything about my history in elementary, middle school, or high school. There was no Black history per se when I was growing up. Being born in 1954, and if you know anything about American history, that was around the Civil Rights Movement. There wasn't this big movement on identity for Black kids. And so I say self-taught because everything I'm getting ready to share with you, for the most part, I've had to learn on my own. And so as a result of that journey of self-discovery, how can I help the next generation of scholars and of students? So my work is called the American History Travel Museum, The Unspoken Truths. I think words are important. I don't call it Black history intentionally, because I want to believe that sometimes Black puts our history in a box, but it also creates sometimes a disconnect from other cultures that may not think their history is connected to it. When I call my work African American history, some may take a pass on connecting to the history. What I call American history, it makes it all inclusive, Arielle. And what it does, it allows for you and I to see ourselves in the story of American history. And if you know anything about North America as it relates to the enslavement period, our ancestors hold a huge responsibility on building what we know now as the economical system, not in North America, but in Europe as well. So I'm just loving this whole thing around American history. I wish you were here. And for those that are not aware, I'm in Seattle, Washington, and she's in Philadelphia. And before I go any farther, I want to thank the Goethe-Institut as well as the Office of Civil Rights, the Office of Arts and Culture, plus Office of Civil Rights here in Seattle for supporting this opportunity. And before we get into this, I want to say this kitchen conversation, because it's like when we're at home and most of the black folks congregate into the kitchen, I want to just, if I can, just share a little bit with you about my work, because I think it's so important that it connects to your work. The museum's broken into 4 sections. Even though it's called American History, I start with Mother Africa. The question is why? Well, he who tells the story controls the narrative. Since I'm telling it, I get to start where I want to start. However, the question becomes, I use storyboards to tell stories. And this is a storyboard, and I'm just going to hold it up here. And it says Mother Africa Aeronautics. And so the story I'm telling is that 2,000 years ago, people that look like you and I were experimenting with flight 2,000 years ago. And so as we continue this journey of education, I ask this question, how come we're not being taught this history in our classrooms, right? So that's the first section. Second section that I think is what drew me to you is the enslavement period. I teach that we weren't slaves, we were enslaved. And so I brought a couple of artifacts, and these are authentic. This is for a teen or an adult. I also brought an authentic branding iron that was used on a ship. These are for probably a teen or a young adult. And this is for an adult. And I'm not sure who this audience that's going to be viewing this, but I just think it's so important. My work is called the American History Trap Museum, the Unspoken Truths. And these are the truths that are not spoken. But the last part I'm going to share with the enslavement period are these runaway shackles. These will be worn by our ancestors in the house, because this is belief that the enslaver, in this case, the white enslavers, will always be fearful of where we were. So this would give them an idea in terms of proximity, right? That's the second section. And because Goethe is, I think, a German-based organization, I wanted to frame history through the lens of not just Black or African-American people, but Europeans as well. In the Civil Rights Movement, these are standard signs, white and colored. But here's some signs that are not talked about. No Jews allowed. No Germans allowed. No Irish. And here's religion. No Catholics. No Polish and no Italians. And so I just want to share this. I want to share this with the audience, that these individuals were also oppressed, even though they weren't considered white at the time. So last section is the inventions and the inventors. And these are everyday items that our ancestors invented and improved upon. So I just want to share that part with you. Okay. So who might you be, Miss Arielle?
Indeed. My name is Arielle Julia Brown. I am first a daughter, a village daughter, a daughter of my mother and my father, Lorene Booker and William Brown, both of whom are born in the same time frame in which you were born. And so I'm so thankful, as I'm always thankful to be in conversation with them and my elders at large. I'm so thankful to be able, for each conversation we've been able to have, especially this one. Mr. Delbert, I am based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am from many places. My people are from North Carolina. They're from Georgia. They are from the swelling, the diaspora. I come from a line of women, many lines of women, in fact, who were and are migratory, who move. And so my life is filled with that tradition of Black migration. I am from both the Bay Area and Atlanta, Georgia. I am an artist. I am a dramaturg. I am a cultural worker. I am the founder and director of Black Spatial Relics. We are a residency program that supports new performance work by Black artists about slavery, justice, and freedom. We have been around for 5 years, and over those years, I have had the great honor of witnessing tremendous work by Black artists, kind of like stepping into ancestral calling to show up for conjure, to show up for recollection, to show up for bridge making, transhistorical solidarity between them and their people across this land, adjacent to the waters they are from, to the waters we traveled to arrive on this land and other lands. I work in many capacities, and I come to you in this conversation by way of my work with Monument Lab as a performance curator and cultural producer for Monument Lab, but also as a Shaping the Past 2019 fellow with the Goethe-Institut and Monument Lab. That's a little fragment of my work. I make art myself that is rooted in embodied practice as a way to be moving toward, dreaming about, calling forward practices of Black freedom. And I work to make space for other artists to do the same. I'm so thankful to be here with you, Mr. Delbert. Thank you for calling in and for lifting these materials, these artifacts, these relics, these instruments of torture. My work, as you're calling forward the period of enslavement, my work is really rooted in creating and supporting spaces through Black movement process that centers and amplifies the experiences, the lived experiences of people who were enslaved. Those people were artists, those people were scholars, those people were scientists, those people were curators, those people were teachers, those people are my teachers. So I thank you, Mr. Delbert, for calling that forward.
Thank you. I don't know if you noticed this, and you're also beautiful, right? I don't know if you noticed this, but when you were talking about movement, you start doing like this, right? So the spirit had gotten on you, it's on you, right? So I see us both, thank you so much, and we do not have enough time, right? I see us both as wounded healers. We start talking about racialized violence and what was imposed on our people, and it's so important that we continue to call ourselves the enslaved versus slaves, because slavery is a noun and enslave what was done to us. But looking through a lens of a wounded healer, I want to ask this question, and for the audience out there, one of the things that Arielle and I did to create an organic space, we had said, okay, great, what's one question that we can ask each other that we're not prepared for, right? And so yesterday, during our tech rehearsal, I asked the question, but I have another question today, and it's really centered around your work. I believe that you did a reconciliation project, right? So when I say reconciliation, What does reconciliation and healing look like to you as it relates to Black people?
Hmm. You know, I think you're calling forward this performance work that I built in collaboration with three other folks called the Double Back Freed Women's Gaze. And it was a performance work about three women who were enslaved, Phyllis, Fanny, and Rose Chase, who were enslaved in Providence, Rhode Island in the 18th century. And these three women were buried all under one single footstone just after, just some years after gradual emancipation had happened in Rhode Island. And we were really interested in creating a work that was dreaming into like what it meant for them to come into freedom, and what it means even in the spirit to swell into freedom, in life and in death as well, and really a clearing of that. And I traveled to every single archive in the state of Rhode Island to collect every fragment of word or half word about these women, and remix that archive that a DJ played live as a score for a movement work that I built. And you know, I think that this question of reconciliation, because it was centered at the Center for Reconciliation, which is a project of the Episcopal Diocese of Rhode Island, and an effort toward repair, because they made a lot of money from the slave trade. And what I learned in really studying and being with that word reconciliation was just like growing in a curiosity toward how Black folks can reconcile to themselves, how we can reconcile to each other. That is our, I'll speak for myself, that's my core project as an artist, is as a Black person in the world, you called us wounded healers, and I identify with that my first project has been to like know and be with my wounding as a map toward larger healing, right? That as I get myself free, I get other people free. And so that's how I sit most often with that word reconciliation, is how can we reconcile to each other? How can we reconcile to belonging to each other again? And as that swells and expands, is abundant, how that makes space for other folks, how that makes space for non-Black folks, how that makes space for like a whole reconciling to each other. Yeah. What is that? Yeah.
That resonates with me too, because to reconcile in oneself is the process of recovery that I think is so important for African Americans in the diaspora. Because here in the United States, there's this term called internalized oppression that a lot of times affects us in a way that it's been normalized, and we're not even sure of the wound and the importance of embracing the wound so we can heal. So I really appreciate you say and talk about the self, because I think that's so important for this journey that I think we're still on in terms of reconciling with the womb. So, so is there a question that you would like to ask me by any chance?
Absolutely. There's a question rising in me right now. As you're saying this language around wounding, I thought about a surgery I had a few years ago where in order for the wound I had to heal, I needed to pack it every night. So I needed to put sterilized material inside of the wound so that it wouldn't heal from the outside in, so that it could heal from the inside out. And I want to know, and that was such a transformative moment for me, like lived experience in my body to help me to really reify like how the work of justice, you know, and healing in our communities has to work, that it has to start from an inner place and move outward. And I wonder, Mr. Delbert, like, I just want to know about moments, instances in your childhood, in your life, that called you into this work. I get a clear sense from you in your spirit that you are called into the work that you do, and I want to hear one story about that.
Well, thank you so much for that question. And it comes from a chronological timeline. So in 1954, I believe you look at my birth certificate, and for some of those that are viewing this, we were considered Negroes or colored. And that's not a time, that's not a word that we really, it's not a positive word, but that's the only word that I had to associate it with because that's what society had deemed me to be. So part of my transformation was going to college at the University of Washington. There was a lot of black people from all over the United States. If you know anything about the 70s, it was during the civil rights. It was really when blacks were really looking to affirm and reaffirm themselves. And so they were naming themselves, and that name was black. When I was growing up, Arielle, in elementary school, if you called me black, it was had a negative connotation. We were going to fight. So I had this almost like an epiphany that my belief system that had been socialized in me as a child was challenged because now you've got students from all over the United States saying I'm black and I'm proud. So from that very moment, the transformation hit me is that I can choose how I want to see myself. I can't control how others see me, but what I can do is I can affirm myself. And from that very moment, my life changed. And so the question's been so great, how can other black kids primarily tap into that identity piece, which is so important. And that's why the Mother Africa section is paramount in my work, because it roots us in that place of belonging. And so everywhere I go, and I'm still evolving, so today I identify as an African born in the Americas.
Yes.
So I want to re-embrace that African part of my identity, but also too want to share with others about the importance. So there's this category in most public schools in the United States called STEM. It's an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math, where we black folks call it STEAM. We add the art piece, right? Because we are very creative people. And so one of the goals I have is to share with black kids in public schools visually, and my museum is totally hands-on, is to see themselves as a possibility other than music and sports. And so as I continue to evolve, as I continue to grow, how I show up in the world is really how I want others to see me, but also to maybe become a model for other people as well.
That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. I feel so deeply this calling that you're calling forward around, transmission and young people and being the bridge. Like, I see you so deeply rooted in that work, and thank you for that.
You know, if I can say this, I'm not sure how much time we have, but there's a topic that's pretty prevalent right now. It's called reparations, right?
Yes.
Now we talk about being a wounded healer and reconciliation. So the question is, what does reparations for us look like when we know for a fact that the documentation have shown that various groups have received monetary compensation for injury, but what does it look like for black people?
You know, I think that there is not a system, there is not a thing, there is not a material existence in this country that is not indebted to black people. I think that there's, I think, you know, every once in a while, I endeavor on my little iPhone in the calculator to like imagine equations that would call forward a number in resource. And yeah, I think we all ought to be in that practice. And also moving, like for non-Black folks and Black folks, like moving into, for Black folks, a sense of deep knowing and worthiness of like every good thing, everything that comes our way is just a tiny drop fragment of what we are owed, and to continue to stand up and show up for and call forward what we're owed. Yeah, and for other folks to join us in that, because I think that we are so clear. I think Black folks are so clear about what we need, what we deserve, the ways in which material resource makes space for us to heal ourselves, makes space for us to reconcile to each other, for us to dream, for us to build forward over the next many generations what we are owed, what our future deserves.
Yes.
So hell yes to reparations. Yes, yes.
Did you say hell yes?
I said hell yes.
Yes.
I'd say something else, but I said hell yes.
Yes, and thank you for that. And here in Seattle, there's quite a few Native American tribes, and so reparations is something that they've been able to benefit from. And so the question becomes: there's this whole term around racial equity, and I think sometimes white folks get equity and equality mixed up. Equality means basically if you got something, you break it in half, it's equal. Equity means basically if you've received for decades, then it's time to give. You don't get anything. And so, this whole thing around philanthropy. When will philanthropists understand that? And you talked about this here. When will they provide us the means for us to do our work rather than give us instructions on how they feel best for us to spend that money? Because I think we're better stewards of what our people need and how they're impacted than people, white folks or people of dominant culture, to be able to tell me what's best for my people. So it's a very sensitive topic for me. I just think that we should be providing free college education. We should have our own hospitals that are centered around Black and brown people with our own doctors. Because racism and this whole notion of white male dominance has made it clear that unless we are put in a position to care for ourselves, there will always be this, in my view, this unlevel playing field of care.
Yes. I just want to say that Black people are the greatest strategists I know.
Did you say the greatest? Did you say the greatest?
The greatest.
All right.
The greatest strategists I know. And the strategies of how you survive enslavement, how you come out of enslavement and become a free person in a land you know and don't know, and you make of yourself such beauty, such power. And I grew up with a mother and a grandmother and people just holding me and raising me who talked about making ways out of no ways, and that's strategy, right? And we are so poised to take every good resource and make brilliance out of it. We've demonstrated that over years. So it's just depths of white supremacist practice that would say that we are not ready.
I know.
um,
But we
to,
love
to
ourselves.
stand in the power
But
of
we
that
love
strategy.
ourselves. And that's that
Yeah.
black love piece. And in closing, you talk about how your family was connected. And there's this term called fictive kin. Fictive kin.
Yes.
It basically meant that during the enslavement period, even though some of our children were sold, when they went to these other plantations, they were embraced in love as if they were their own. And so that hasn't stopped. And it's not going to stop us loving ourselves, because you know what? Black love is here to stay.
That's right. That's right. And we have all that we need, and we've been demonstrating to each other that we have all that we need.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. In such an array of practices that I'm so proud of. And
Arielle.
and you were in that
Arielle,
with me.
can I give you a virtual hug?
Yes, yes.
Because
Mr.
one
Delbert.
day I want to meet you face to face and let our
Yes.
spirits connect. And because of COVID and some other things, this is an example of black folks making a way out of no way, right?
Yes,
We are not going to be
yes.
denied our voice become a weapon to challenge those systems and institutions that refuse to value us as beautiful black people.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay?
Yes, yes.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank
you.
Mr. Delbert.
And I want to make a promise, both of us, that this is not going to be the last time we connect.
Yes, no, absolutely not.
So I'm not going to say bye. I'm going to say until we meet again.
Yes, until we meet again.
Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of a song I grew up with in church, right? God be with you until we meet again. And I want to say thank you, Mr. Delbert, for sending me meditations. Y'all, Mr. Delbert sends me meditations every morning. And every day they somehow like seem to hit. I'm like, what is this? How does Mr. Delbert be knowing like this?
It's the creator.
Those have held me in moments. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
So I'll see you again soon.
Yes.
And stay
yes,
encouraged,
I'll
okay?
See you soon. You too.
Much love.
You too. Yes, so much love.
Yes. Okay,